Go to school. Learn everything you can about what you want to do. Be it keyboards, trumpets, drums, bass, so that you can play in any situation, right? So I'm not just a jazz drummer, I'm not just a rock guitarist. I can play anything because I can read the notes on the page.
Cathy Rich, to wear that name and to have the intensity of the legacy of your dad, it is an amazing, amazing story that you have to tell, and we wanted to catch to that here because a lot of these musicians that watch this weren't even born at the time, and so I mean, just to capture the story of your dad and what you're doing now as a vocalist and pushing the band is a great, great story. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you, my pleasure. I always love, this is, like I said before, this is like the longest you and I will be able to sit in a room together and talk. So I miss that.
Our lives are so intense,
I know, unbelievable.
I met your dad in 1971. I was 18 years old, and Al Miller was a top drum teacher on Long Island. And Al Miller and your dad were partners in the Marines in World War II. They were both from New York,
wow.
So they paired them together. So they were basically, literally partners in the Marines for a couple of years. It was an intense time, so they became close friends. So whenever your dad came in town, he would call Al up, and Al would go to hear him play. And of course, I then became one of Al's top students, so whenever anybody would call him up, he would drag me along. So I had the chance of being backstage to watch your dad over 100 times performing at a consistently high level all the time.
Yes.
All the time. If I went to hear him play 6 nights a week with Al, 6 nights a week, 2 shows a day, it was fantastic, every show at a high level. So the standard that Buddy had and maintained is really, really uncommon and an amazing story in itself.
Yes.
So here you are, a young child, you're born into this incredible family. Tell me about what it was like in the young days of being with your dad.
It's interesting because my first memory is of traveling with them when I was 2 years old. And we went to the Orient, and we went to Hong Kong, and we went to Australia, and we went, in those days, flying took forever. Yeah. So they had berths on the planes where you slept, right? Because it took like 4 days to get to Australia on a plane. So, it kind of started very intensely. Yeah. It was always at that level of always going and traveling and doing and people around, and I wouldn't have had it any other way because it afforded me the opportunity to see the world at a very young age. When we're here and we're just at home and we're in school and whatever, you're learning about these places. Yeah. To actually be out there in the world and seeing other cultures and seeing how other people live, it's really an eye-opening experience.
It's amazing because the people that he hung around with were always the best in the industry. Not just in the music industry,
right.
The film industry, sure. The biggest of the biggest. And I remember being backstage several times where, I always say there were 3 different levels of people that were backstage. All the great drummers in the world.
Sure.
So they would come by to hear your dad play, and they'd sit in the back and they'd watch, and they were all in awe. I mean the greatest drummers in the world, the Max Roaches, the Elton Jones, the Tony Williams, the Steve Gadds, the Carl Palmers, all these guys were backstage. We'd see them all the time. Then that was the first tier. The second tier were all the great band leaders. Ellington would be there, Duke Ellington, Count Basie would be there, Stan Kenton, all these great band leaders would come by so they could hear the band because Buddy always set this high standard. The third level was the Rat Pack. Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., all these people would be there, Joey Bishop, and Jerry Lewis, all these people, and it was amazing to see. So you didn't know backstage what the intensity was going to be for that show, but Buddy always played at an incredibly high level all the time. How do you figure that out, that he did that?
It's funny that you're talking to me about that right now because we've recently acquired his last recordings from Ronnie Scott's in London from 1986. And this was literally 6 weeks before he was ill and not playing again. Wow. And then 2 months later, he was gone. Yeah. So you're thinking, this man is 6 weeks away from never playing again. And these tapes are the most unbelievable, brilliant playing in a different way. I mean, he was so relaxed, and his level of musicality and the musicians in the band, and everyone was like this laser unit of incredible musicianship. Yeah. And so he was, even till the very, very end, he was always at that level, and I think that's just how he was born. Yeah. It was never, you were never disappointed when you went to see him. you were never like, oh, he had an off night. He may have told you he had an off night because he was more critical of himself than anybody.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So, we humans would sit back and go, that's the most unbelievable thing. And I saw him a million times. Yeah. And every time was an experience for me.
Oh, I saw him when he had his back surgery. I saw him when he had his quadruple bypass. I saw him when he had 104 fever. Every performance when he went out there was always at a level that was just incredible. He never let down his audience, ever.
And I think that stems from the fact that, he comes from a vaudeville family. He came from 2 years old, having that instinct and that, you just had that in you that, the show must go on no matter what. Yeah, yeah. And he just learned that from such a young age that he felt that people are coming and spending their money to come and see me. Yeah. And they're trying to get away from their problems, right? I am not going to go out there and show them that I have my problems, right? Yeah. He said, so, it's always going to be 110%, no matter what. If I'm sick, if I'm in pain, whatever, I'm going to give it to them.
It's amazing. On the bus one day, when he traveled in the bus, we were backstage, and at the time, Joe Morello was there, and we were all just kind of sitting in the bus, and I said to Buddy, I said, how do you maintain this pace? Because we had just seen him like 6 nights in a row, 2 shows a night, and every show was incredible. And backstage, there was always a different set of people that you were meeting. So it was always at this high, intense roller coaster ride all the time. But when he got to the stage, he just leveled himself and just performed at a highest level. And at the time, he played a solo all on the snare drum. There were 2,000 people in the audience, and he played the solo on the snare drum. It was so intense, he brought 2,000 people to their feet screaming from one drum. We all looked at this like this was incredible, and he had like 104 fever. So I mean, he really maintained. And I said to him, I said, you have this personal constitution that is unbelievable. That is really unbelievable.
What's that ethic? That work ethic that nothing gets in the way. And I've seen him where he was laying on the floor in a dressing room with the lights out with excruciating back pain before he had his back surgery, and was just out of it. And they'd put the lights on and say, buddy, it's time to go. And literally carry him up to the bandstand and sit him down, curtains opened, and playing like there's nothing wrong.
Absolutely.
And then the curtains closed and they carry him back down. So it's like, really? He just never wanted to let anybody down.
You mentioned that old vaudeville school. In vaudeville, you went on stage and you got paid when you were on stage. If you were not on stage, you didn't get paid.
Right.
So he had that ethic at 2 years old.
Absolutely.
And with all the books that have been written, and Mel Torme wrote a great book, Traps the Drum Wonder, all these great books that are out there, which I highly suggest everyone to go out there and do the research and do the homework. It's amazing that he just moved at a steady pace, at a high level, all of his life.
Absolutely. I mean, no one has a career that spans almost 70 years without a lull. Yeah. I mean, he was always on that upswing, and it never bottomed out. Yeah. It was always going up till the very end. So it comes from that ethic of just, you got to work, you work, and you don't let people down. I mean, his father was, tough. You get out there and you work, or the family doesn't eat.
Exactly.
It's like that.
And that's how it was years ago. But you have that too. You have a good work ethic.
I'm not a slacker, let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
I do. And, you and I have a long history together, and you helped me create, the memorial concerts. And,
how great was that, right?
Just unbelievable. So, that in itself is, that's historic.
Yeah.
And so, I have to thank you for all of that.
The memorial concert was kind of interesting because how it turned out was Al Miller, I said to Al Miller, it was a year after Buddy had passed away. Now, he died in 87.
Right.
It's 88. And in none of the magazines, the music magazines, had they mentioned that Buddy had been gone for a year. And when Gene Krupa died in 1973, there was a concert that was put on that your dad hosted.
Yeah, I was there.
That was at the Felt Forum in New York.
Madison Square Garden.
Exactly right. And it was just an incredible event. And being there and seeing how classy your dad was on stage, as natural as you can be with a microphone speaking, and as funny as you can imagine.
Yes.
He was always as
funny.
witty as you can imagine.
Yes.
And he just held that crowd, and they did this event for Gene. So I had seen that. And when a year had passed after Buddy had died, I said, boy, there's no mention of Buddy. I don't want to happen to Buddy what kind of happened to Gene.
Right.
It kind of just fell off the face of the earth. So that's when I said to Al Miller, I said, boy, I really want to put together an event here on Long Island. We had a big following of teachers.
Right.
I said, we can network these teachers to get tickets sold and do an event. We had a theater in the round called Westbury Music Fair. They had a great venue, 2,700 people. And I said, but I want to contact the family. So he said, well, I have, Marie, your mom's phone number.
Right.
So I said, let me have the phone number. So I called up your mom, and I said, boy, you don't know me. I'm just a drummer from New York. I got your number from Al Miller. I said, I need 5 minutes of your time. I want to tell you an idea that I have. If in those 5 minutes you don't like what I have to say, I'll hang up and I won't bother you again. But if in those 5 minutes you like what I have to say, I need an hour to fully explain it.
She probably said, call Cathy.
Well, see, and that's really what she said. She said, you got the 5 minutes. So when I told her what was happening, she goes, okay, now that I heard everything, I got it, call Cathy.
There you go.
All right, so there it was. I tracked on your number, we got it. And it was, and we put this idea together of being able to have all these different drummers come in and perform. We had all companies involved. It was amazing to see the event. We sold the place out of 2,700 people. A great event. And we also had brought in food, cans of food to be given away for the Save a, you Save a Family program.
Yes.
Incredible. So all these positive things kind of followed in your father's wave that he created. Yeah. And still to this day, it's amazing. But I go back to a concert that I heard when you sang with the band.
Yes.
How old were you when you started singing with the band?
12. It's ridiculous.
How was that?
Scary, because I had always been a singer. I mean, I was always singing. I was always putting on shows. We were always, from the time I was, teeny. Yeah. I was always in the school choir. So one day we're riding around in the car. The beat goes on, comes on the radio, and I'm just singing along with it. Right? He's like, "I want you to come and sing that with the band." And I said, "Okay," because we're doing an album in LA in about 2 weeks, so I'm gonna get a chart written and you come and sing. I'm like, okay. So now in my brain, I'm thinking, recording, you're going to a studio, right? So we go to LA in 2 weeks and we pull up to a nightclub. And I said, "I thought you said we were recording." He said, "We are." At a club. I said, "In front of people?" So I'm a 12-year-old kid going, I'm going to record in front of people. I've never sung in front of, by myself in front of, Yeah. So we go in and I'm freaking out. And as I walk through, I look down and sitting right where the vocal mic is Judy Garland. So
the pressure's on.
All right. So if that wasn't enough, just coming into a club to have to sing, and there she is sitting there. So I run to the dressing room and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do it. There's no way I can do this. He's like, you'll be fine. He takes me out, sits me down next to Judy, and she proceeds to give me this 20-minute pep talk about, never let anyone intimidate you. You get up there and do it, and it's going to be great. And the rest is history.
How fantastic.
Yeah.
How fantastic. You realize, and I've said this before, there's a book inside of you.
Yes.
There's a book inside of you that at some point it has to happen.
It will happen.
These are stories that, we do these interviews for this next generation to be able to understand what came before them and to understand, to be inspired by these stories. And you have these incredible stories that have to be at some point put out.
And on and on. I have so many. And it's funny because just in my daily conversations, one will pop up and I'll be like, that's ridiculous that I knew that person.
Yeah.
Or that's crazy that one was around.
Yeah.
And just hanging around. So, there's a lot.
What memories do you have of Jerry Lewis? Because he was also a good drummer and came to a lot of concerts.
He was. Obviously, from the day I was born, and he was my godfather. Wow. He was always, he was the best. To be able to be a kid at the time when Jerry Lewis was the biggest star in the world, right? So, and he would always send me things, and when the Nutty Professor was coming out, he sent me every bit of merch there was that came with that movie. And when I was 6, I remember I was living in Miami and going to school, and I was telling my friends that he was coming to my house. And nobody believed me. But I was like, no, really, I called him Uncle Jerry. Yeah. So by the time I got home from school, there was literally a line of kids outside my house waiting to see him. But he was the best. He really was. And he and my dad were, the best of friends. And he was with me, through my life until he passed away.
There's video footage of Jerry Lewis and your dad performing on Jerry Lewis's show.
With the sticks.
And they threw a big box of sticks at Jerry. But the entertainment part of your dad, aside from the great drumming skills, and that's, we got it. The stories of him playing with Sinatra all those days. We got all that. as just a celebrity in himself. He was so fast with his wit. He was so funny. He was so sharp. All those shows and those clips on Johnny Carson
Oh my
are
gosh.
all classic clips. There are people still to this day that are searching and buy the Johnny Carson videos just so they can go by and research
Oh, I know.
Buddy's segment of that.
I know that. I'm friends with the person that owns all the shows, and I said, you really need to do a DVD that's the best of Buddy on The Tonight Show.
Absolutely.
And it's something that, we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know, I mean, yesterday I was in the NAMM show,
Yeah.
obviously, and 1,000 people come up and they're just like, my mom used to wake me up every time Buddy was on The Tonight Show to get up and come and see him. I mean, it's unbelievable, to this day, that he is so remembered and so, loved still.
Yeah.
And I like to think that's because of, what we have done to make his legacy live forever.
Well, I want to talk about that because what you're doing right now I think is so fantastic with Greg Potter on drums and you're pushing the band. Tell us about that. Tell us about what's happening.
Well, before he passed away, it was actually the night before he passed away, he called me in and he said, there's a couple of things that I want you to do. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I would like you to keep the band going, do something for young people, and make sure that the music is heard.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. I had no idea, what that was going to turn into. Or, I'm like, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be fine. It was like that. Yeah. So after he was gone, it literally took me a year of sitting in a closet, crying every day, to sort of figure out what did he mean by that. And I called Mel Torme, and I said, I don't know what to do. He asked me to do these things, and I don't know how to do it. And he said, why don't you have a concert for him?
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's a great idea. And I said, how? Yeah. He said, call the man who puts on the Newport Jazz Festival, George Wein.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. So I called George Wein, and I said, I want to do something, for my dad on one of the nights. And he said, I'll give you July 1st at Carnegie Hall. I went, okay, now what? Right? It was like that. So now I had to figure out, okay, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Right? So it happened. It was called the Celebration of Life, and it was for him and Mel and, everybody.
I was there for that.
Yes.
And I still have the brochure.
I do too.
It was fantastic. And what a great show. But all these artists, you mentioned Mel Torme.
Yeah.
For those, it's another
don't
name.
know who he is, right?
You got to do the research.
Absolutely.
Go back and research who Mel Torme was, because not only was Mel Torme the velvet, the velvet voice of heaven.
Yes. Great drummer, great songwriter, wrote the Christmas song, for heaven's sake,
Absolutely right.
So, and just an amazing talent.
Yeah.
Arranger, piano player, vocalist, scat singer, all of it. Just amazing.
And they would hang out together, and they had many shows. They had an album out together. They had put together, together again for the first time.
It was just a great album.
It really
Direct-to-disc.
So
imagine that.
They had the skill to do that. They had this incredible integrity to be honest with the music.
That's it. I mean, just to have that knowledge and the musicality and just, that it's a genius. I mean, there's just no other word that you can use because to perform at that level all the time, and to be able to get through, 10 songs without making one mistake that you're recording. So there's pressure and there's nerves and there's whatever, but it happened.
Absolutely. I had the chance of meeting Sinatra, and Frank Sinatra said, Buddy had no idea he was a genius.
Right.
He had no idea, he just didn't, and again, it was just a part of his character and his way. He didn't really, warm up or practice before he performed.
You know what he told me? When someone came up and said, how do you warm up before the show? He said, I take my hands out of my pockets.
Yeah.
So that's it.
What was the line, if you remember, what was the line that when he was being wheeled into at the operator, your mom told, and you told me the story years ago. Tell that story.
As he was going in for brain surgery, he was laying on the gurney about to be wheeled in, and the nurse leaned over and she said, Mr. Rich, I just need to ask you, are you allergic to anything? And he looked up at her and he said, yes, country and western music.
This was
I mean, this is at the
right to the end.
The moment, exactly.
Right to the end.
Right to the end.
But he really lived in the moment. He was always
Absolutely.
in that moment all the time. Wherever he was performing, and I heard him in Vegas, I've heard him.
Yep.
He was always in that moment. So with the band that you're doing right now, this is kind of what you're doing. When I heard the band perform, and you had Dave Weckl perform with the band, and Mike Scott. I mean, it's amazing what you're doing. Fill me in more of what's happening with the band now.
Well, we sort of started this road about 7 years ago. And, Greg Potter and I decided one afternoon, we're like, what if we just go into a studio and play a couple of tunes and see how it goes? Yeah. And we did, and it turned out really well. And we were, not like we were shocked, but, we put a band together in Chicago and went in the studio, recorded 2 tunes. I had put it up on Facebook that we were in the studio, and an agent that afternoon said, "Do you want to go on the road?" We're like, "Oh, okay." So literally that was in the summer. By that February, we were on the road. So it hasn't stopped. Yeah. So we've been really, really fortunate. And, it's a struggle at first because people, it's like, well, it's not Buddy, but it's Cathy. Yeah, so, that kind of plays into everything.
And it's the songs.
It's the music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, no one ever is going to be Buddy. Right, and that's not the idea. No one's looking for the next Buddy Rich because there's never going to be one. Right. It's the spirit that he brought to the music. Yeah. It's the fun that he brought to the music. It's him, So I'm as close to him as anyone. Yeah. So I was there. I saw it. I heard it every night. I know the level that it was. So I would never do anything that would diminish that. And so we hope that, apparently we're doing something right because people come out and they love it.
There's a certain relationship that you have with the songs. I mean, when I think of Love for Sale,
right?
And when the recording was done that Neil was involved with,
yes,
as a tribute to Buddy, I remember when Steve Gadd had played Love for Sale, he listened to it and he really kind of, you could see he studied Buddy's playing, and he didn't try to play it like Buddy, but he played it in the spirit of Buddy, in the style of Steve Gadd.
And that's what you want, because you don't want people that are going to come in, and we had 22 drummers on Burning for Buddy, and each one brought themselves.
Absolutely.
Nobody was trying to, I'm going to play this lick just like Buddy, I'm going to do this fill just like Buddy. Everyone came in and brought themselves to the music that they chose. Yeah. And that's what we wanted. We didn't want people coming in and, being Buddy Rich clones, because you can't do it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
It turned out really well.
But it's amazing when I had interviewed Dave Weckl here, and Dave was just an
Dave who?
Yeah, he's an absolute saint of a person. His interview was so wonderful.
Dave.
But he was so influenced by Buddy,
yes,
and then to have the chance to play with the band, he really said it was like surreal, because those songs, as you're hearing it and you're inside and you're driving it from a drum set standpoint, is pretty powerful, because it was such an impact of the music with all the times that we heard that, like all big swing face, all these tunes, like,
I know.
Gosh, Norwegian Wood, these are songs that are just so when you hear
they're
them.
ingrained in you from him.
Absolutely.
So, but again, with Dave, we did a week, 12 shows, 14 shows with him in Europe and in London 2 years ago. And again, he brings himself to the music. I mean, he's an amazing drummer. Yeah. And, he comes in and he gets it done. That's it.
Amazing, yeah.
He's intense, as you well know.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, what I love is the intensity of Greg Potter. Greg is another person that has a fantastic level of intensity and a fantastic level of respect for the music.
Yes.
And what Greg does is, Greg finds his sound inside that music, and he realizes it's all about the music. Anybody playing that song, listen, as you said, Buddy, you can't. You can't. It was just so unique at what he did. But what Greg does really brilliantly is he kind of finds his thing, pushes it, and drives the band, and just keeps the spirit of it all going.
And that was the whole point of it, is just people want to hear that music. Yeah. I'm telling you, people that walk in, we played in New York last year, and when you walk in and you see the stage set up, because we have the music stands, you have the white marine pearl drums, you've got the logo, and people literally start crying when they see the band set up like that. It's like, it takes you back. So Greg brings something, because we really kind of plucked him out of a completely different genre of music, and we literally learned this music. And the level that he puts into learning the music and how much he cares about it, he really, really studies it and cares. It's not a lark. It's not something he does for fun. It's intense, and he really, really puts his heart and soul into it. And you can't ask for anything more than that.
Absolutely. It's very, very sincere, for sure. Tell me, what motivates you?
I always hear my dad's voice in my head. So it's that, and I saw how he never, ever let down. He was always there. He was always, if it wasn't, I always say that the least part of his genius was his ability to play drums. His genius as a person, as the things that he taught me, how you behave in the world, what you give back to the world. That was the stuff for me that motivates me to this day, because he was so passionate about not being selfish with anything. He was the most giving person of himself, of his time. People don't know about, they think he's that mean guy that yelled at the band. No, that was a part of him because he was a perfectionist and he wanted the band to be perfect because, he was out there giving his heart and soul every night. So if he heard, things going on behind him that upset him, he was going to let you know. He was that guy who was going to tell you exactly what he thought and felt all the time.
Absolutely.
You never had to wonder, I wonder what he's thinking, because he's going to tell you, right?
That was that New York in your face.
I'm going to tell you what I think. I'm not going to mince words, and you can handle it or not. Take it how you will. But that's the incentive for me to keep going, because I know that he's happy with what we're doing. And I know that this is exactly what he wanted me to do, is get out there, sing, keep the band going, keep the music heard. That's it. Those are the things he asked me to do. And it's important to me that kids coming up know that there was a man named Buddy Rich who was the greatest ever at what he did. And for young drummers coming up, you need to go back and look at history.
Absolutely.
Look at all the great drummers. From way back, from Buddy's influences. So there wasn't just Buddy. There were many before him who paved the way. And that he loved all of those men. And Gene, obviously, they were great friends. And it's you have to go back. You can't rewrite history. It is what it is. People came along that moved the art form forward.
Boy, how beautiful. I asked your dad one day who one of his favorite drummers was, and he said Chick Webb.
Yes.
And when you go back and listen to Chick Webb, and recordings are difficult to hear, but you really hear that influence of how Chick pushed the band, and how Buddy took that and just took it to a whole nother level of what he did.
I think he took the best parts of everyone that was, out at the time, and that he was listening to at the time, when he was a teenager in Brooklyn and listening to the radio, and getting all of these bits and pieces from all the people that, he loved and admired, and then took all that and did what he did.
Absolutely. And to clarify, he was a Marine. He was trained as a Marine. So to understand that mentality, that's how he ran the band.
Yes.
And he once told me, he said the reason why he ran the band like a military operation was because that's what he learned under Tommy Dorsey, who was in the service.
Tommy Dorsey said it was like Hitler.
Absolutely, man. These guys really.
That was like
on time.
Yes.
That
you're
bus
getting docked
left.
if you're 1 minute late. If you hit a bad note, I'm taking $1 for every note you hit that's wrong. That was intense. I'd like to think that he maybe toned it down a little.
He absolutely toned it down.
But imagine you are, older. The band is all in their 20s. So you're like herding cats, right? It's like all children. You're like the principal of the school, and you've got to keep everybody in line because they are kids after all.
Absolutely.
And it would be chaos any other way. So he had to do what he did the way he did it.
And he raised the standard, and he raised their level of playing.
Yes.
They had to raise to his standard.
Oh, sure.
Which was high.
Very.
But they did, because every time I heard the band over 100 times, it was great.
I'm telling you, and the guys that were in the band from when I was a kid to now will still tell me to this day that he was the best musical experience, the best learning, the best teacher to this day, that they've ever experienced. That no job they've ever had since playing with him compares.
The amount of great musicians that came out of that band that are still playing today owe so much to his, intensity of how he ran that band.
That's right.
And the high musical standard. These young students that kind of listen to this here, and they're seeing you here, and they're kind of hearing these words.
Yes.
In closing, what would you say to this next generation of how they can be prepared musically and in the business of music that could lead themselves to have a successful career in playing music? What would you say to them?
It's an interesting time we're living in, where people think that they put out a 5-minute YouTube video and I'm going to be famous. That's all anybody wants to be now, is famous. So, we live in a Kardashian generation right now. My advice to anybody coming up that wants to be a musician, go to school. Learn everything you can about what you want to do. Be it keyboards, trumpets, drums, bass. Learn everything you possibly can. Learn how to read music, you know, so that you can play in any situation, right? So I'm not just a jazz drummer. I'm not just a, you know, a rock guitarist. I can play anything because I can read the notes on the page.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're missing right now, is that because it's such a immediate thing, that you can put up a video and get 1 million views. Okay, now I'm famous.
Yeah.
But I can't do anything else except that 5 minutes that I put up, right?
Yeah.
So go in and learn everything you can possibly learn. Take a business course too. Because
very good advice.
I'm telling you, it's good to know the other side as well. You know, because I came from this side, but then I learned this side. And so now I like to think that I have a well-rounded knowledge of the music business, because it is a business.
Beautiful, boy, well said, and that's
Thank
advice
you.
that they need to have. And
Yes.
with you, what I love is absolutely the beat goes on. You are pushing this forward. You're making this happen.
Until
It's
I
great.
can't do it anymore.
Good for you, Cathy. Thank you so
you.
much. On behalf of the sessions, we thank you so much. Keep it going. I love you so much.
I love
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Great, fantastic.